USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. An in-depth look at this week's top college hockey matchup and a preview of the other big games.
Welcome to the USCHO.com Game of the Week podcast for Wednesday, December 26, 2018. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in Buffalo, New York at KeyBank Center. Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4. Well, Jim, right now everybody's eyes are tuned north of the border to the World Juniors Championship out in British Columbia.
We are joined now by Chris Peters from ESPN. He handles the NHL draft and prospects analysis for the site and the network. And Chris, welcome in. It's World Junior time, and it's, I know, one of the favorite times of your year.
Yeah, this is about as good as it gets for me, and super excited to be going back to the World Juniors this year. And yeah, I mean, this is as good as it gets in the prospect world.
And we're going back to Canada. You are actually, as we talked to you, I believe, on a layover somewhere, and heading up to Vancouver, Victoria. Those two cities will host this tournament. This is a tournament that we know it's global. We know that it does well in other markets, but Canada seems to be a market that really embraces this tournament better than any.
Oh, no question. I think in the fact that it's going to be in Western Canada this time is going to be a huge boost for the tournament. You know, it's been kind of in Southern Ontario and Montreal and, in Buffalo, and that area has kind of been tapped out. And now we're going back west. And, I think even Canada is not playing in Victoria, but every single game in Victoria sold out within a few hours. So that's the level of interest this tournament brings. And I'm certainly excited to be seeing that atmosphere after it was a little more on the subdued side in Buffalo last year. So should be a lot of fun.
You mentioned level of interest, and when I think of the level of interest in this tournament on the state side, United States, we go back 15 years ago, and not a lot of people could have told you what the World Juniors was in the U.S. They've won some gold medals. They've had some medal success in this tournament of late. I think that helps, but also the exposure it has gotten on national television here in the U.S. This is a different event now on this side of the border.
It definitely is. And I mean, even from when I started when I was at USA Hockey, the first year I was there, it wasn't even available on TV here. And now to have every U.S. game broadcast by NHL Network, to have, back in the day, they also used to stream them online for free. They don't do that anymore, but that was a big factor in helping the tournament kind of grow in interest. And I saw a lot of people kind of jump on board, but absolutely, the medal success is probably the biggest key to, and not just the medals, but the way that they've won. I mean, the thrilling win against Canada in 2010 in Saskatoon with John Carlson scoring the overtime winner. Troy Terry's heroics in 2017. I mean, that tournament, actually, that 2017 game, it almost gripped the nation. I mean, there were people talking about that gold medal game all over the place, and that was streamed for free, and that was a great moment for USA Hockey and that tournament to really capture an audience and show people, the more interest there is, the more that we'll continue to see this kind of coverage. And, back when I was doing this, there weren't that many people really even paying that much attention to the World Juniors. And now it seems like it's an annual event where NHL fans and college hockey fans and obviously junior fans are all in on it. So it's been great for me to kind of see this growth and interest, because it's obviously been something that I've been passionate about for a long time. And it's great to share that with a lot of other people now.
We're talking with Chris Peters from ESPN. We're talking World Juniors. And Chris, the U.S. roster, or you look at it, it's once again a lot of collegiate players on there. That's something that we've come to expect. It's a feather in the cap of the college game. What do you think of this roster in terms of the team? They've had some good pre-tournament success in their exhibition games. But what do you like about this team? Where do you think there's some upside, and maybe what are some of the challenges they might face?
Yeah, well, I think the key factor for the U.S. team is that they have a lot of balance, and just there's a good mix of types of players without necessarily trending towards low skill defensive players. There aren't that many guys like like we've seen in years past. This is more of a skill team. I think that it's always difficult to score, but the U.S. doesn't have a ton of, natural goal scorers. They have Oliver Wahlstrom, who has struggled at BC, but it seems to have come alive in the pre-tournament, the World Juniors. Jason Robertson, who plays in the OHL as well, is a big time scorer up there. But they don't have a ton of high end finishers, which I think is probably one of the areas where we may see a little bit of concern. But I think what you lose with that, you get a lot more in skill, speed, and you've got guys like Jack Hughes, who probably will be the number one pick this year. And then you've got a very mobile blue line led by Quinn Hughes, and that's going to be key to triggering the transition. And that's going to be a big part of USA's game. They also have tremendous goaltending. I think all three guys that they brought, you could conceivably start in this tournament. It looks like it'll probably be Kyle Kaiser from the Ottawa Generals, but I'm sure we'll see some Caden Primo and maybe even a little bit of Spencer Knight at some point in this tournament. And Spencer Knight's a BC commit. So really talented trio of goaltenders. And as you know, if you can get a hot goalie in this tournament, you can really do a lot of damage. And the U.S. has been lucky to have that in several years here where they've gotten the goaltending they've needed to advance. But this is, I would say, a very entertaining team, a solidly built team, and again, a balanced team.
Chris, when I look at the pool that the U.S. will play in this year, Slovakia, Kazakhstan, Sweden, Finland, there's one thing glowingly missing, and that is a game against Canada. A little different for the U.S. not to have Canada in their pool for the first time in quite a while, it feels. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage? Because I still look at Sweden and Finland as two very deep teams.
Yeah, well, I think it puts more pressure on you to win the group. For one, I think that if you see Canada, you'd rather see them in the gold medal game than in a semifinal situation. I think U.S. has had much more success in the final against Canada than they have in the semis, and so I think that to get them when you're kind of at your peak, when you know everything about your team, when you know everything about their team, that's a good time to get them. I think the U.S. is probably the team that matches up best against Canada in terms of speed and their defensive capability. So I think the key here is, try to unseat one of Finland or Sweden, neither of which are as deep as they have been in years past, but have a lot of talent still. Win out, and then you've got a chance to, I fully expect Canada to win their group on the other side. And then as long as that happens, then, you probably don't see them until the gold medal game, or you see them in the semifinal and you have the home team advantage, so you can play the matchups that you want to play, which Mike Hastings obviously is a guy that gets the most out of his team. So I think that's key as well. So that's the ideal scenario. It's not going to be easy. It never is. And the U.S. starts the tournament with Slovakia, and that's actually a tough game to kind of start your tournament with because the first game to me is almost always one of the toughest games of the tournament because you're just still getting into it and you've only just made cuts. So a lot can happen, but very intrigued to see what happens. And I kind of like the balance in the groups this year.
We're speaking with Chris Peters, NHL draft and prospects analyst from ESPN. Chris, the U.S. team is heavily collegiate. The Canadian team, a couple of college players. Across the spectrum of teams in this, how many collegiate players are there scattered around?
Oh, yeah. I haven't counted them, but there are quite a few because you've got the Czech Republic's got Jakub Kondolik from UConn. Arni Talvidi is the captain of Finland, and he plays for Penn State. So there are quite a few college guys. Martin Pospisil is not in college yet, but he's on Team Slovakia and currently leading the USHL, or one of the top scorers in the USHL in scoring. And he's committed to St. Lawrence. So I mean, those are the kinds of players that we're seeing now. And there's Larson from UMass is on Finland. Like they're all over the place. So I haven't sat down to count each guy, but that's been one of the trends in this tournament is that you start seeing more and more college guys from the European teams when that was just non-existent before. And I think what those colleges are finding, those players are coming in very well prepared. They're coming in playing at a high pace, high level. They've also, many of them are playing in advanced roles in their college teams. And for some of the other players that they have on their tournament, they're either on their pro teams or their junior teams where they're not challenged as much, or they're on the pro teams where they're not getting as much ice time. So in a lot of ways, those college guys are coming into this tournament as prepared as anybody. And I think, we also saw Ian Mitchell get a letter for Canada, and the Denver defenseman is going to be a huge part of their team, probably a top 4 defenseman, and Shane Bowers is probably going to be their primary shutdown center. So it's really been interesting to see kind of the way that the college player has evolved in this tournament. But I think that the respect has grown for the college route around the world just because of how well those guys have played when the time has come to play in this tournament.
Speaking of the college exposure, you mentioned early on about this being a good opportunity for Western Canada to have the exposure to the tournament. How much is this adding some exposure to the college game, especially as you see for example, the BCHL becoming a bigger and bigger area for recruiting?
Yeah, not just in Canada, but I think around the world, it's a great advertisement for the college game. And I was talking to my friend Corey Pryman, who works at The Athletic, and he had spoken to Ruslan Ishkakov at UConn, and had mentioned that he wanted to go to play in the league that Clayton Keller played in because he saw him in the World Junior Championship, and that really turned him on to the college hockey. So I mean, that's the impact this has. This is viewed around the world, and it's viewed by so many people. And they to see those guys and see what Troy Terry did a couple of years ago, and you hear all about how he's from the University of Denver. That matters, and I think that the World Juniors has definitely played a role in just gaining respect in Canada, because I think the barrier has always been that culturally the upper echelon of developmental hockey is the CHL, which it's ingrained in those communities. But I think the more that players kind of see that there is another option, to see that not just it's not just a route for lesser players or for guys that couldn't make it to junior. It's actually a route where if you're a great player, you can go and have a completely different experience than all your buddies and still have a really good chance to make it to the NHL and to play in World Juniors and things like that. So I think that this tournament as a whole has been a fantastic advertisement for the college route.
Well, it should be a great tournament. 2 venues, Save on Food Memorial Center in Victoria. That will be the home for Team USA for the round robin, and then the medal round at Rogers Arena in Vancouver, British Columbia. You can go to usahockey.com and click on Team USA's page to find the entire schedule for this tournament. But Chris Peters from ESPN, I know that this is one of your highlights of the year. I hope you enjoy it, travel safe, and I don't think either one of us are hiding anything by saying "Go USA."
Right. I try to tone it down a little, but let's be honest. It's where I'm from, but I'm just hoping for a great tournament and a great opportunity to see some of the top under 20 players in the world. And I can't wait to get there. And thanks for having me on, guys. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
That's Chris Peters from ESPN. He's the NHL draft and prospects analyst. We'll hope to check back in with him later on about the World Juniors Championship. Let's pause right now for a word from our friends at the NCAA Frozen Four.
Speed and precision, unrelenting power. This trophy is not given, it must be earned. The 2019 NCAA Frozen Four. April 11th and 13th at KeyBank Center in Buffalo.
With a shot. Saved by Morris. Takes the shot.
Visit ncaa.com/Frozen4 and get your tickets today.
This is the USCHO Game of the Week podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Welcome back to the USCHO.com Game of the Week podcast. There are a number of tournaments going on this weekend, and the most prominent of them is the Desert Hockey Classic.
We are talking with Arizona State head coach Greg Powers. And Greg, you're going to be going into a tournament, the Desert Hockey Classic. And I know that when you put together a field, you don't know what you're going to get every year, but you might have put together one of the most competitive in-season tournament fields, inadvertently maybe, but with some great teams coming in, Minnesota State, Minnesota, Duluth, Clarkson. This really argues to be the best tournament, in-season tournament that we're going to get this year.
Yeah, we think it is. I mean, it's we knew it was going to be really good. We put this together, and Clarkson, I believe, Minnesota State was the last team that that we were able to fill the field with. So we knew what we were getting. Clarkson was a top 10 team all of last season. They're a ranked team again this year. We knew Minnesota Duluth and Minnesota State would be top 5, top 10 teams. So it's a tremendous opportunity, not only for our program to play in a field so strong, but more importantly for our region of hockey fans down here in the desert to be exposed to such amazing high-level college hockey. And from what I understand, ticket sales have gone very well so far, and I think they'll continue to ramp up. It's going to be at Gila River where the Coyotes play both of our games on Friday and Saturday night. The ASU games will be broadcast nationally on the Pac-12 network. So again, just a tremendous opportunity to expose our sport to this region, and hopefully weekends like this will lead to more growth.
Greg, I've heard a lot of coaches talk about these in-season tournaments, and many approach them differently. Some don't like them, and some try to avoid them entirely because they're kind of a little bit of an unknown going in. Sometimes you have two teams to prepare for on the second night. But I also hear coaches say that this can kind of mimic what you have to face in a postseason. Obviously, as an independent, you don't have a conference tournament, but sitting at number 9 of the pairwise right now, you also have the possibility of an NCAA tournament. Does playing in an event like this maybe mimic or do anything for your team when it prepares themselves for what you might face in March or April?
I think so. I think you can look at it that way. I mean, it's essentially going to a regional as a 14 tournament. You just don't have a game if you lose, right? So I certainly think you can spin it any way you want. With us in particular, we love these tournaments because we are independent. The more, trophies that our guys are able to play for in season, the better off we are. We played in 2 last year. We went to Pittsburgh to the Three Rivers, and then we came right back out west and played up in Vegas, and we ended up winning our tournament in Vegas. So we love them. We think they're tremendous. And we couldn't be more excited about playing in it.
Yeah, I had to ask. That was the next question where I was going. You played that Ice Vegas Invitational last year and got wins over Northern Michigan and Michigan Tech. That's obviously a big feather in the cap for an independent team to be able to do that against a pretty strong field in that tournament as well. Do the guys take some solace in that? They know that they've won some sort of a trophy, and when you're not playing for that conference championship, does it maybe even put more of an emphasis on these smaller in-season tournaments?
Yeah, I think it does. I think just naturally, anytime you're in a tournament at any level, and you can win something, it's a different feel. It's a much different feel. It's a more competitive feel. The air just feels different, and certainly it did up in Vegas. And for our guys, that was really, I still think to this day, kind of the turning point in our program was feeling what it was like to go on the ice and celebrate a big win in front of. We had a couple of buses of students drove up from Tempe for that, and so it was a great moment for our program, for our guys to win a trophy together at this level, and really since then we haven't looked back, and we're gonna go into the Desert Classic with a goal of winning a trophy, and the more trophies you can win and the more your guys can feel that, I think it'll translate in bigger moments.
Well, it will be the next time your team steps on the ice, the Desert Hockey Classic. You will start against Clarkson on the December 28th, the semifinal game. That'll be a 7:30 Mountain Time start. And then the winner of both games will play either Minnesota State or Minnesota Duluth. The losers play in the consolation game. But the Arizona State games in both of those nights will be Pac-12 network, something you can watch nationally, something I think that college hockey loves as a product, being able to put an event like that on national TV. So, Greg Powers, thanks always for catching up with us. We appreciate the time, and good luck in the second half.
Hey, it's my pleasure, guys.
Jim, when they put that tournament together, I don't think they expected it to have 4 ranked teams like that.
It's very rare that you can pull this off in any tournament. There's usually always one team that just, is an outlier, or you maybe intentionally, as maybe the host, you schedule somebody that you think will be a weak team. But you can tell when Greg Powers put this field together, he gets Clarkson in there, and that's the team that they'll face. Clarkson has been an up-and-coming power, a national tournament team for a number of years now. So it's not like he was scheduling a cupcake. So I think that when he put this tournament together, yes, you're right. He doesn't know that he's going to end up with 4 nationally ranked teams. But boy, this was a strong field no matter what, no matter how you shake that one out.
This is a hard one to handicap. I think it's worth noting that Minnesota State is going to be there without their head coach, Mike Hastings, who's up with the USA World Team.
And that can make differences. I've seen that in past years. Some teams struggle a little bit when their head coach is missing, but this is something they've also probably been preparing for a very long time. This is, Mike has known he's going to have this role since before the start of the season. So his assistant's very capable. I'm sure they'll do a great job with the team, but it does sometimes affect the team a little bit. These are still college kids that are used to listening to that one voice. And when that voice changes, you never know how that impacts a team.
Well, as we turn to some other tournaments, the next one on the list in prominence is probably the Great Lakes Invitational. Michigan Tech versus Michigan, Lake Superior State versus Michigan State in the first round on Sunday. And while there are no ranked teams in this, these are all some teams playing pretty good hockey right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just mentioned the Arizona tournament. The newest of new college hockey tournaments. They end up with the 4 ranked teams, and one of the oldest holiday tournament, if not the oldest holiday tournament, the GLI, ends up without a nationally ranked team. But it doesn't matter. I think when you put Michigan, Michigan State, and Michigan Tech in here, and then they usually rotate that 4th Michigan school, you put those 3 teams in there at least. Take Lake Superior out, and there's a lot of bad blood, and there's a lot of rivalry between those 3 teams. That's a big part of it. Lake Superior, I think they always walk into a tournament like this feeling they have something to prove. So that's another, wrinkle. I think there's going to be some good hockey played in that tournament. It always generates that big crowd at Little Caesars Arena, and I hope that will be the case again this year, because it's a great tradition, a great event, one that I think is one of the true highlights of the college hockey calendar every year.
Another one that's been on the calendar for decades is the Catamount Cup up at Gutterson Fieldhouse in Burlington, Vermont. UVM hosting that one. That one is a pre-scheduled round-robin tournament. Alabama-Huntsville will take on Northeastern in the first round, and Rensselaer's at Vermont. Northeastern, the only ranked team in there. Is there anybody in that one who could be spoiling for an upset?
The host. I think Vermont tends to love to play that tournament. They have a very good goaltender in Stefanos Lekos, and he gets hot. He starts shutting teams down. You never know that. It's one of those things that the same team could end. 2 teams could end up with 2 wins, and Northeastern and Vermont will not play each other. So if they each win their games, then it comes down to goal differentials and all of that sort of stuff. So you would think that Northeastern could have a big advantage there because of their high-powered offense. If you're scoring a lot of goals, usually you can win that goal differential part of the equation. But you never know. I think Vermont, as the hosts, have pulled off some championships in past years where you didn't think that they were going to be the favorite, and I think that's the case again here.
And another tournament, the Ledyard Bank Classic, again predetermined. Providence and Brown in the first round. Also Army and Dartmouth.
Yeah, this is another interesting tournament. I traveled up to this one a few years ago, and one thing I realized was that this used to actually be an every other year tournament with the Catamount Cup. They would play 1 year in Dartmouth. They would play 1 year up in Burlington, and both teams would be in the tournament every year. They've since split, and now they have 2 different tournaments that are hosted every year. But this is one that I know that Bob Gaudette really loves. He loves this event. They put in very good crowds for an off semester tournament. You don't have the students there, but the big crowds of the local community come out for this one. I think this is a good field. When you look at the fact that Providence is pretty hot, Dartmouth at times was scoring like there was no tomorrow. Army we know is competitive, and Brown becomes that kind of outlier. So I think this is a good field. This should be a pretty good tournament. I'll go, and I didn't say it about the Vermont tournament. These two, the 2 things I don't like, or the one thing I don't like about both of these tournaments, I don't like predetermined fields. I really like playing a semifinal and I like moving on to championship games or moving down to consolation games. That's the way these tournaments really should be set up, but I'll get off my soapbox there.
Yeah, I saw that at the Catamount Cup a few years ago with RAT when they won the tournament. They played the early game and were on the bus before they knew that they had won the tournament. So
yes,
that I agree with you on that. A couple of single games that I want to highlight. One of them, Quinnipiac and Colgate, a non-conference game. They're going to play at the old Nassau Coliseum since vacated by the Islanders.
Good venue to play in for sure, and hopefully they put in a good crowd. Quinnipiac is they've done some good things when they get to play down in the city, or now obviously down out in Long Island, but they can draw, and Colgate seems to have a good fan base. So I hope that draws well, and I hope it's a competitive game.
And one last one, New Year's Eve, the last game to be started anyway in 2018. Boston College is at Notre Dame. Notre Dame at number 6 in the poll for a single game on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, in Boston College, they finished that first half really strong, 6-1-2 in their last 9 after starting 0-5. This is a very competitive matchup here. And these teams used to play every year. Then Notre Dame joined Hockey East, and they were kind of forced in the league schedule. Now that they've gone to, away from a Hockey East schedule where they're automatically paired against each other, it's good to see the rivalry maybe renewing itself. These are two teams that should play every single year. They're just longtime powers. They had that great rivalry in football that now is inconsistent and maybe not even scheduled. I don't think it was scheduled this year, and I don't know if it's scheduled going forward. But this is a good old Catholic school rivalry, and this should prove to be a really good game. And if that's the last game of the year, that is a way to close it out.
Is this the game where BC finally ends the 22-game winless streak out of conference?
Well, I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to be trying to end that against the number 6 team in the country on the road. But you never know. I mean, that is one thing. I think that's a monkey they would love to get off their backs. And they're playing good enough hockey right now. We'll see if the break impacted that at all. Same thing for Notre Dame. But I know that Jerry York never talks about that streak, but I guarantee in the players' minds it's there.
Well, for Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger. We wish you a happy new year, and we'll catch you next time on USCHO's Game of the Week podcast.
This has been the USCHO Game of the Week podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit USCHO.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.